opponents we had to fight. He had his own militia. He's Shiite. He has made no bones about it. He is waiting for the Americans to leave. Has said so. Most of these IEDs that blow the guys up and their equipment going down the road, these come from Iran in the last 2 or 3 years. Come from, manufactured in Iran, come through the Shia element right here in the south, the Mahdi army, the Sadr's militia, and these come in and these are passed out and put on the roads to kill Americans and whatever, all right? You have to understand what's going on here. Now this is the point you cannot miss, folks. Don't miss it. Daniel opens this vision describing what he sees by saying, I was at Shushan in the palace at the province of Elam, and I found myself in vision beside the river Ulai. But it's 300-400 kilometers long, 200-300 miles long. Where is he standing? When you first read it, you say, well, he's right there at Shushan. He's at Susa. He's at, No, you keep reading. Because finally, when Gabriel shows up in Daniel's vision to say, I'm supposed to explain this to you and give you instruction concerning the vision you've seen, Gabriel is standing at the widening of the Ulai. Large body of water, lake, ocean, sea, a river. Small body of water, large body of water. When the lesser stream meets the larger, it can't pour its sediment out because there's a larger volume of water pushing against it. And it forms what's called a delta, or an alluvial fan. If you read Daniel carefully, this is where Gabriel is standing in the vision. Yeah, I want you to see this. You need to understand. We're looking at Basra, and why should we give attention? Because 6 months ago, the British, who were our allies in Iraq, pulled out of Basra. During those years, since 2003, Iran has infiltrated an estimated 250 to 300 plus thousand Shia insurgents through here. Now we have the British out of Basra and we have the Americans pulling out. You better watch the news. You better watch the news. What happens is the second higher horn does something to aggravate, irritate, madden this power from the west that has a horn, it says, a notable horn. And Gabriel tells Daniel that that horn is the first king. He's the #1 guy. So the notable horn in the second vision, I maintain, represents the lion with eagle's wings. And he comes and he throws him down and he stamps on him. I mean, Ahmadinejad, he's trying to look tough. He's a pansy. This is not a fight. At the personal level, I don't expect us to go into Iran with troops on the ground, but I expect us to blow the hound dog out of them by missile, by air, by whatever. Okay? What you're not reading every day and not hearing every day in the news is that the U.S. now has 2 entire battle groups in the Persian Gulf, one right outside. Last week or 2 weeks ago, we moved the one in the Persian Gulf just outside. I mean, that's just a bathtub. You don't want to get caught in there. Water's too shallow. The U.S. and Israel are doing everything that they can to goad Ahmadinejad, Iran and Syria, etc., into doing something so that we now have cause to come in and get you. Every other day in the news, the Israelis are prepared to bomb Iran. And on and on and on. I don't know what Iran and Ahmadinejad are going to do. I don't know if it's a combined attack on Americans here and the Israelis here out of Syria and Hezbollah and Hamas. I don't know. I rather suspect that there's a plan in place. I don't know. Whatever it is, that's the trigger point. Right here. Whatever, you know what a Pyrrhic victory is? You win the battle, but you lose the war. Yeah. That's what's being described here. We beat the stew out of them, but we lose because there's an economic collapse that follows. You have to go on in Daniel's second vision to see that this is what it's all about. Now we have the world hanging by a thread as it is economically, I'm talking about. You've got Europe in turmoil, you've got everybody out there, and the Chinese are putting on a brave show, and oh, we're growing, and we're, you know, if everybody doesn't go to Walmart, you understand. The whole world and the markets, the global stock markets and the banking system are hanging by a thread. And all we need is another war in the Middle East. Yeah. And you will not wake up to a stock market going that way. You can see this, can't you? Does this make any sense to you at all? Yes. This is what Ahmadinejad has boasted, that America is vulnerable and that if she attacks us, we will break her financially. That's the boast. That's in writing. It will happen. It will happen. And it is part of a dark strategy from the dark side. Because when you have a crisis, you can put a Hitler in power. Yes or no? Yeah. When people are hurting, they're looking for somebody to ease the pain. And in this crisis, number one, we're going to have, I believe, an economic collapse that will collapse the U.S. dollar, collapse the U.S. economy. And if we have time later in the afternoon, I'll take you into a dream or vision that was given to Nebuchadnezzar, King Nebuchadnezzar, which as far as I'm concerned, absolutely represents this superpower at the end. And it says 7 years of misery and poverty are going to follow. And that's the 7 prophetic years of the end, right here. So it is possible. That's all I can say. I'm not a prophet, not the son of one, but it is possible in my reading of what's going on here that you and I, in this country, which is the most powerful, richest nation ever in the history of mankind, are about to become a third world nation. And we're about to eat crow. I mean, it's no more chicken. Say, well, what is this all about? Because there's a sinister power behind all of this to create a crisis. The New World Order has a history, and I'll take you back very quickly in the history. We had the First World War. That's 1916 to 1918, thereabouts. First World War. It's called the First World War because there had never been a world war before. And this involves many nations and men being transported across oceans and on and on and on. And the First World War was such an awful event in the history of mankind and all that followed, because you had the millions of people who lost their lives in this 2-3 year scenario, 4 years. And then you had this Spanish flu that came along and wiped out another 50 million people as well. And people thought this is the end of the world. They literally believed this, a lot of people. And it was the President of the United States of America, U.S. of A. Number one horn, eagle's wings. It's the President of the United States of America, and he was, come on, who was president? Who? Woodrow Wilson, thank you. I am old, okay? Woodrow Wilson. It was Woodrow Wilson who stood up at the end of that First World War and announced to the leaders of the nations that were broken, that were broke, that were whatever. And he said the world cannot survive another world war. We cannot have another. And it was President Woodrow Wilson who proposed the League of Nations, it was called. And it originated in the United States of America in New York City. The League of Nations. And if you'll read just a little history on the League of Nations, its purpose, everything behind it, they said, this will end all wars because we're going to find common ground between the nations. This is the war that's going to end all wars, and the League of Nations is going to bring the world together. Well, how many years did it take until the Second World War came along? Not many. Not many. Not many. And now we have the Second World War that made the First World War look like a, Hitler was personally responsible for the death of 57 million people, because he's the one that kicked it off and then got the Japanese and the Italians and the Americans and the British and the Russians and everybody. 57 million people died as a direct result of Hitler. As soon as Hitler was out of the way, Stalin took over in Russia. You have any idea how many million Stalin got rid of? Minimal 60 million. Some estimates I've read as high as 90 million. Nobody knows. There was no real count taken. Okay? When Stalin is gone, Mao Zedong comes along. Have you ever read any estimates about how many million Mao Zedong got rid of? 75 plus million people. In a stretch of 2-3 decades. At the end of the Second World War, this statement was made: the League of Nations has not worked. We must come together. And it was changed to the UN, United Nations. Where is it located? Come on, New York City. The United Nations is treated like Washington, D.C. It's in the United States, but the property belongs to a separate entity. All right? That property was donated, that the UN building stands on, by the Rockefeller family. U.S. Now Now, when we get to this vision of Daniel, mirrored and enlarged and zoomed in upon in the book of Revelation, we see the lion, the bear, and the leopard. This is in Revelation 13. And they're all put together. That's the beast that's on the way. We will not see that beast until we have a crisis. It has to be global. That's why the four winds of heaven strove upon the great sea. There's trouble all over the world. It's going to be trouble, trouble, trouble everywhere. We have to have this crisis. And then we're going to see this first beast rise. And he's going to strut his stuff. He's going to do his thing. And he's going to propose a new world order. We got to have new money, new banking system. We got to get rid of all the debt. I watched Glenn Beck. I can't help it. I don't know if it's news or entertainment. It's both. I watch Glenn Beck. I respect the man. Glenn Beck is like a lot of other, quotes, conservative voices out there, and he's concerned about all the trillions that we're going into debt and in debt and we can't pay it, and our kids can't pay it, and our grandkids and our great-grandkids, and down the line. We'll never be able to pay off this debt. I sent him an email and said, Glenn, come on, hang it up. They don't plan to pay this debt off. No. They don't plan to pay this debt off. We're going to have a crisis. And then they're going to put this plan together in which if you'll just get on this horse with us, if you'll ride in this buggy with us, we'll cancel all your debt. That's the carrot we hang out there. And things are going to look up. It's going to take about 3 years or so. Things are going to be looking up. Oh, not great the first day or the second or the first year or the second it gets, it's looking up, looking up. But then the Bible says, this is New Testament, the Bible says, and when they shall say peace and it says in the King James peace and safety, but if you read it in the original, it says when they shall say peace and prosperity, crisis number 2 comes. Sudden destruction. Boom. We have to deal with that later in the afternoon. This is where we are right now. This is where we are right now. We don't have a full-fledged new world order yet, but let me tell you, folk, when you see the DVD and you just follow, just go online. Go online and plug in New World Order and read yourself crazy. Because the leaders of these nations are desperate. They know they cannot pay the debt. They know that. You want an interesting sidelight here? About 20 or so years ago, there was a couple of guys in Kansas. I believe they might have been Missouri, Kansas or Missouri. And they thought the world was ending back then, and they thought all of this that's going on right now was happening back there. And so they gave themselves to some intensive study of Matthew 24 and Mark 13 and Luke 21 and Jesus' conversation about the time of the end. And they focused in on Luke 21 and verse 25, 26, etc. I'll just quote it for you. Upon the earth, distress of nations with perplexity. The sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear and for looking after the things that are coming on the earth. What they did was go back and just parse this thing, going through the Greek. And they said, we've looked at this, and this is really what it says if we could put it in modern English. The time is coming when the nations cannot pay their bills, and there will be no way out. And I say, wow. Somebody read the news before it got there. That's where we are. You know it, I know it, the world knows it. There's no way to pay our way out of this debt. No way. But this is the plan to do it, right here. New World Order. As opposed to what comes down the line. We have to talk about this in the afternoon. There will be a collapse of the dollar. The Chinese announced it 3 weeks ago. The Chinese announced 3 weeks ago that they would no longer buy U.S. treasuries. They are holding about $1.1 trillion U.S. greenbacks. What are they worth? What are they backed up with? Was there a time in American history when the U.S. dollar, the greenback, had something behind it? Yes.
Or not.
You know all of this. I don't have to tell you any of this. Federal Reserve note. Okay? What does that mean? It means if you're dumb enough to take it, that's what you got. Well, what does it have behind it? Well, what it has had behind it are the Saudis and the Chinese and the Japanese and the other countries out there buying U.S. Treasury bonds, U.S. Treasury notes, which allowed us to print more greenbacks and keep things going, okay? When they stopped buying U.S. Treasury notes and Treasury bonds, here's what happens. It was announced a week ago. Are you listening? Maybe I shouldn't tell you. That the Federal Reserve has been pushed into the corner and is now having to buy its own Treasury notes. So let's see if you understand what's going on. I print this to buy this that I printed, so I can print more of this.
That'll work.
I'd like to do that in Alabama.
Why don't we all just do it?
Can you even feel the crisis that's brewing? Listen, folks. You're talking about the most powerful nation, economically, militarily, etc. You're talking about the most powerful nation in the history of mankind. And you're talking about bringing this powerful superpower to its knees. And you say, wow, no, you don't understand. That's you and that's me. We're coming down. So I want to put this together and then put things into your hands in case you're not coming back. Shame on you if you don't come back at 2. Daniel says to King Nebuchadnezzar, you're this head of gold. You're the number one. You're the guy. In the second dream given to Nebuchadnezzar, you're the great tree and all the birds of the air and all the beasts of the field, and you're feeding the whole world. What? In case you don't understand it, we have about 6 to 8% of the world's population in the U.S. We consume 80% of the world's goods and services. You're this great tree. Everybody's looking to you. You're feeding everybody. You're giving everybody what they need, and you're coming down, King. Cut this tree down. You're going to go crazy.